My name is Nicholas Corcel, and I'm an American writer who spent the last year traveling the world while trying to grow my fiction career. Through a string of largely unconnected events, I ended up deciding to hit the road full time, and I've been writing on my Substack and documenting my journey here on YouTube ever since. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys how I'm able to afford this lifestyle because, as I'm sure you all know, being a writer, especially a young writer with only one book that's only sold maybe 150 copies, isn't exactly the most lucrative business in the world, and travel, especially in an American context, is viewed as a privilege. It's viewed as something that is only accessible to the upper class, and those two ideas really clash with each other. You don't think about a young working class American writer as the type of guy who could just travel full time, and I think today's video is going to shed a lot of light on that and maybe make travel more accessible to you, or at least open your minds to what life can be as a struggling creative rather than just starving in a city that you don't really love in America. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Unfortunately, none of these creative projects pay me any meaningful amount of money yet. On a good month, I might make $10 to $20 from my novel, but that doesn't really get you anywhere. Maybe a couple cups of coffee, but that's about it. So, in order to support myself while traveling full-time around the world, I had to find a different way to monetize my writing and actually make a consistent, reliable stream of money. To do this, I freelance and write for companies across a multitude of different industries back home in America. And it's really important that they're based mostly back in America, because when you're traveling, really the key to maintaining a higher quality of life than you had back home, or at least the same quality of life, is to earn in dollars or any strong currency. So dollars, Canadian, Australian, euros, something like that, and going to a country where there is a very favorable relationship between the two currencies. For example, that's how I'm able to have such a great life here in Turkey, is because I live in dollars, and if my salary was in Turkish lira, things would not feel very cheap at all, but because the dollar is so strong and its value is very consistent, my lifestyle only really goes up. And there's always going to be 10 to 20 countries in the world that have a very favorable relationship towards people with very strong currencies in their banks. Now, getting on to what I actually do for these companies to provide them enough value for them to allow me to work remotely. I think it's easiest to separate it into two categories. I do a lot of email work and I do a lot of content work. The content work is a little more enjoyable and consistent that I've found so far with my experience, but it pays a little bit less. Email, on the other hand, is a little bit of a harder industry to break into. It's a lot more sales driven. You write an email out and it is judged within a week, basically. As soon as it's sent out, you're judged on how many sales you can make. And that writing doesn't really feel like writing, but it can pay absolutely fantastically. There has been times where I've gotten paid $200 to $300 for a single email, and during those moments, it feels like the best job in the world. But be warned, it's not the most artistically fulfilling job at all, and in many ways, it's not fulfilling whatsoever. Content, on the other hand, is more of a happy medium between creative writing and helping a business financially. My specialty with content is long-form blogs, so I will get contracted by a company, particularly in the niches of like tech or mental health, things like that, things I have experience in professionally outside of me going remote, and I will write them very long-form, informative blog posts. With tech companies, my main responsibility is to write a 2,000 to 3,000 word post that is breaking down something that's very complex so that their target customers can easily understand it. So sometimes it is just trying to communicate what like a very complicated software does to a regular guy who might use it but knows nothing about the greater tech ecosystem, where other times I'm talking to business owners who know all the slang and things like that. And so it's really all just about figuring out who your target audience is and delivering them something of value. And content is a little bit better because it's more long term. When you start a blog, you're not going to make any money for like 6 to 9 months at least. And so it's really nice to land a client who understands that, and you get like 6 to 9 months of a really helpful and mutually beneficial relationship before you're judged. Whereas email is more produce right now or we're gonna go find somebody else. A lot of times they ignore things that are out of your control, like list quality, list quantity, external market factors, things like that. So in my opinion, businesses get more value out of blog posts than they do email, about 9 times out of 10. And they're just a lot more enjoyable to write. So that's really what I focus on. At this point in the video, you're probably wondering how much money you could make doing something like this. And Honestly, this leads into one of the biggest cons of freelance writing. It's just that there is no such thing as a correct answer on how much money you can or will make. It's incredibly up and down. For example, since starting traveling about 8 months ago, I've had months where I've made as much as $5,500 US. I've also had months where I'm below 1,000. And so I think that if you are a person that can really accept and embrace this hugely variable income and be able to like kind of squirrel away some money when times are great and be able to withstand those tough times, I think it could be great for you. But if you are super risk averse and want a salary, I don't know if this would be a lifestyle that is really suitable for you. For example, right now it's the month of January, and for me at least, January has always been one of the worst and hardest months to really make it as a freelancer. A lot of companies are reassessing their budgets, and there's just, I don't know, there's not a lot of work that's actually being done in January. January typically is a planning month, and so it's not uncommon for my income to be like $400 or $500 in January. Whereas in like September, November, I was making like an easy $4,000 or $5,000. And I don't know, it's kind of wears on you. It makes you think, oh, was I just lucky back then? Will those times ever come back? And truthfully, they pretty much always do, but that fear never goes away. And so I think that that's something that you really need to keep in mind if you are considering doing something like this as well. And that leads me to my final point of today's video, and it's would I recommend this lifestyle to any other young creative? And honestly, the answer to that is yes and no. It really depends on your risk tolerance and how much you're willing to suffer and struggle to be able to travel full time. I think for other people, they might be better off just going home, working a job that pays pretty well for 3 to 6 months out of the year and then traveling the other 3 to 6. Whereas perhaps others who are more open to risk might just want to roll the dice and do it. Either way, I think that if you're planning on doing this, there's a couple great steps that you can do. If you're going to try to make it on the road, I would suggest lining at least something up first, right? You don't want to leave with $0 in your bank account and $0 coming in each month. I had a couple grand coming in consistently. I ended up losing that job actually very quickly after leaving, but it helped a lot in those first couple months, and it helped me get some confidence with traveling. However, I'm aware that that's impossible for everybody, right? So if you can't line something up beforehand, honestly, even a couple $100 helps. But if you can't get that reliable income stream coming in before you leave, I would highly recommend just saving up a nest egg before you go. About $5,000 or $6,000 US is more than enough to make the jump and at least give it a try. For me, I always like to have at least enough money to buy a plane ticket back to my home country and have a few months of setup time. But for you, that amount might vary. It depends on what you have. It depends on if you have a family that you can go stay with either at home or abroad, and just the set of unique factors that impact your situation. I think that we all should play to our strengths and the resources we have available. Another great tip that is kind of obvious, but I think a lot of people don't really think about is go to a cheap country first. I know that a lot of Americans might feel more comfortable going to Western Europe right away, but an Airbnb in, say, Barcelona might cost, I don't know, $2,000 to $3,000. Whereas you can go to Bangkok or Vietnam or even places in South America and pay like $400 or $500. So I think that that's something to really think about. The less money you spend each month, the less money you have to make. And while that is very obvious, I think it's something that a lot of people overlook. We just get so caught up in like our American mindset where 2 to 3 grand is nothing really back home. Whereas abroad, that's like a upper middle class life. And so I think really think about how you can get your expenses as low as possible in the beginning, make the jump, and then upgrade your lifestyle as you make more money. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My name is Nicholas Corsell, and I'll see you in the next one.